All right, how you doing, Latino students? Well, you should have all your work in classroom. I'm gonna upload an additional reading for the week, and we'll just keep it there. Um, so not too much work that I'm giving you guys right now. I think we'll slowly up that in the weeks, intentionally going slow, just so that we all can get kind of used to back to the flow of things. But I had you guys reading chapter one in your books, and the harvest of empire is the name of that book, and so you're reading two parts this week over that. And the author Gonzalez, is what he's doing here is he's pointing out the differences between Latin American societies and Anglo American societies, and that they are, at least part, the result of each group's distinct uh, to colonial history. So the fundamental differences we're looking at this week is differences of language, cultural customs, political system in European countries of Spain and Great Britain, and how that has been responsible for the ways contemporary Latinos and Anglos seem to clash. Gonzalez points out a lot in this chapter about American Indians, the natives that were here, summarizing how these civilizations functioned prior to the European colonization. Of these, and Central and South American civilizations were by far the most advanced. You had the Aztecs and the Mayans, and in Mexico, and they had a vast and organized, very sophisticated civilization. And you look at the Aztecs and their capital of uh, Chictlan, which is now Mexico City. Their population at that time is estimated around 250,000, whereas in modern London at that time, you only had about 50,000 people. And one of the journal entries that Cortez wrote, he came over, one of the first explorers to come over from Spain. He noted how beautiful this great Aztec city was, and noted how advanced and how beautiful and how they created that whole landscape, their infrastructure, how well put together that was. So we're not talking about just like savage barbarians here. We're talking about a very sophisticated uh, civilization. So they were very great civilizations, and then it goes on and talks about the North American civilizations of Indians, which were more uh, isolated, disproportionately developed. I mean, they had some federations, which they came together in the Iroquois Federation and the Pueblos down in Arizona, which strengthened them, but mostly they lacked technological advancement and socio-cultural unification that the comparably to the Aztecs and the Mayans. And then what we're going to learn in the next subsection, Gonzalez starts to talk about how Spain and British history and culture affected their respective colonial legacies. So by the time Columbus made his transatlantic voyage in 1492, the European continent had already recently begun to recover from a series of plagues that wiped out huge, big swaths of the population at that time. And during this time, Spain is the dominant influence, especially when it comes to Catholicism. And there was a unification of Spanish kingdoms of the Moors during the La Reconquista, which prepared Spanish explorers to use military strategy in their conquest of America. So Spain at that time was seen as like a world power, a world superpower. Um, so Spain was unified, but Great Britain, it took them nearly a century before it established its first settlement in America. So um, Gonzalez attributes some of these things to internal conflicts during that time from Great Britain, including the war was called the War of the Roses and religious schisms, which sparked the ongoing Reformation, which started in the 1500s. Um, and Spain was able to avoid that from being a mostly unified country under the flag of Catholicism. Let's see. In chapter does explain as well that the Spanish colonizers believed that a religious conversion of indigenous tribes was a fundamental goal from the beginning. Now, if you think about this, you had Catholic monks which settled in Spanish colonies throughout the Americas and tried to spread Christianity to these groups of Indians. So think about this: you're a Christian. Well, most of you guys know a little bit about the Christian faith, way more than what we would, even if you're not considering yourself a Christian, way more than you would recognize a Native American religion. So they did things much differently. And the Aztecs did have human sacrifice, and some people say it was on a daily basis. And they sacrificed to a war god. So one of their major gods was a war god. The Aztecs were very powerful people, warriors, um, who were ruthless when it came to war. There's stories about how they would cut off the faces of their enemies and wear them. They would keep the skulls of the sacrificed, and so the Spanish was able to see some of this stuff in the beginning and see how they lived. It was just something completely different and foreign to their Catholic background, to what they grew up in, and obviously they didn't have things like human sacrifices. So you can say, hey, the Spanish Inquisition was terrible and it was grotesque, and you would be right. But my point is that you had Spanish people coming, these people from Europe, that have never seen these people, and they didn't know what to think about them, and knowing a little bit about how they worshipped their god and the type of gods they worshipped was very opposite of what they did. It might have even been a scary thing to see that this group was sacrificing humans and also worshiping a war god when it comparably to their faith. So you can kind of see where they were coming from. I'm not saying that what the Spanish did was right at all. I'm not taking sides, but I'm just trying to tell you maybe what their motive would have been during that time, putting yourself in their shoes. And I think it's very good, when you look at history, to try to put yourself in both parties' shoes, and not try to pick sides or bad guys. I mean, I even like doing that when you think about things that everybody would agree that are terrible, like World War II, the Nazis. Like, what was their mindset? Like, why did they do that? I always find that sort of thing fascinating, and not approving of that behavior at all, but trying to understand, like, why would somebody do that thing? What led them to do that thing? How did they see the world? I think those are fascinating questions that, as a historian, we should have the responsibility to explore all those different sides. So when looking at these things, like trying to understand, like, what was the thinking of the Spanish colonizers when they came in and they saw these different people and how they lived, and then what was the thinking of the Aztecs at that time, seeing these people, these great ships. They had a different religion than they worshipped. They had different horses. They never seen a horse before. They never seen the dress that the Spanish had with their armor. Of course, they were lighter complected, comparably to them. So all these things were very, very foreign to the Aztecs as well, and it must have struck them in a very real way as well. And we're going to learn more about um, how they perceived the Spanish, and how the Spanish perceived the Aztecs. So just like we have been learning in this section, and so another um, huge thing that the author points out is that the Spanish did massacre and enslave and procreated with the indigenous peoples, so the natives there, and that they conquered. One of the ways that they conquered the natives there was because of disease. They brought over smallpox, and that led to a lot of Aztecs dying from that. But these were very powerful warriors, and a lot of historians would say, hey, without that happening, it may have been a different story. The Aztecs may have been able to defeat the Spanish, because they were warriors. They were, even though they didn't have a gun, a musket, or anything like that, they did have these type of swords that weren't like the swords from the Europeans and stuff that you would see like a Viking show or whatever. But they would have like this huge, made out of like a rock, and it would have like spikes on the end of it, and it was quite heavy, extremely sharp. So you may want to look up that in YouTube, the weapons that the Aztecs used. Pretty interesting. But anyways, so the Spanish did conquer them. They enslaved them. They didn't convert to Christianity. A lot of them did convert to Christianity though, and it led to the proliferation of the unique mestizo race, and what that is just a mixture of Spanish and natives. What like a lot of us are, we're part of that mestizo type of mixture there. Like I told you, I'm Spanish, and then I also have Mexican blood, and so that's part of me as well. So that's a little bit of summary about what you guys are reading. Obviously, there's much more to the reading. I don't want to give it too much more than that. Just kind of highlight, talk a little bit about the reading. While I have you, I encourage you to continue that reading. That reading, I will pull out some questions. So you can have a quiz on that. You'll probably see those questions again as far as like the test goes. All right, so that's it, and hopefully you all are doing well. And if you need me, just let me know. All right, I am signing out.